Right, I'm going to call up our next contributor, David Harbour, from the Love Andover branding, or from Love Andover, Andover Radio. I've heard this guy talk over the years, and we've not always seen eye to eye, but I'm open to suggestions now. Just picking up on your dog, we interviewed a BCFM, a greyhound once, champion greyhound, and also a horse. Came into the studio, although we couldn't get him into the studio, so we had to walk through the building, out the other door, came round and put his head through the window of the studio, and we interviewed a horse. So anything's possible. Do that on commercial radio and BBC. Moving on, because that was bang on time. David Harbour from Andover Radio, I'm just going to hand over to you because you're a professional.
Thank you, Phil. I'm a little worried about being third on, incidentally, because it means your presentation has to be better than everyone else's, but fortunately I'm in front of Dom, so that should be okay. The last presentation that I did, incidentally, lasted for 40 minutes, and I could probably have spoken for another 40, so I've been told that I've only got 10 minutes today, so if you don't enjoy it, at least it'll be over and done with quickly. That's what the missus said last night. So Andover Radio, we're 6 months old this week, and some of you who know the radio station will be kind of aware that there are two brands going on. Quite simply, the radio station is Andover Radio, the strapline is Love Andover, but we use the Love Andover brand for a lot of other things. When I started, I kind of figured that I wanted a radio station, and I rethought myself quite quickly, and I thought, actually, what I'm going to be doing is actually running a business. But it's a business that happens to be a radio station, that happens to be a community station. So everything that I do kind of starts off with how do I run this as a business. Quick question, what's the purpose of your radio station?
People.
Brilliant. Does anybody know?
Entertain.
To entertain? Any others? Engage. Wow. A tumbleweed out there. I think probably it's written in here somewhere. There's legislation that tells you what the purpose of your community radio station is. If you narrow it all down, I think it's that. It's about serving your community. But how do you do it? You do it because you've got a radio station. So you must focus on the one thing that you applied to Ofcom for, went through all those blood, sweat and tears and that lengthy process, including giving up your weekends for free, as Dave pointed out. You're serving your community because you have a radio station. What's the most important part of the radio station? We learned that with both the previous presenters up here. It's about the listener. Sorry, Phil. It's about the... Sorry. It's all about the listener. It must be about the listener, because if you didn't have the radio station, you'd be running a website or producing a print publication or, you know, a community group of some description. But it's not just the listener, is it? Because we're also serving local charities, we're helping the local economy, we're helping local not-for-profit organisations, we're working with local schools, you know, we're working with local councillors, so that there are lots of smaller community of interest that we have in there. But you know what? They're all radio listeners, so let's go back to what Pippa was saying. Let's focus on the bits that is really important to us, and that's serve those people who are within your community. I think there are some stations that I've visited over the last 5 years probably that don't quite do it. So if your job is to have a radio station that serves your community and is building radio listeners, your job surely is to maximise radio listeners, not minimise them, or be as unfeasibly niche that you may as well send out your programming on cassette. So it's all about maximising the listeners to your FM service. It's a bit unfair for me to pick on the WI here, but I wanted to use an organisation as an example. So let's use your WI as one of those communities of interest that you use on your radio station. How do you get them on the radio? I discovered this a little while ago. What you do is you give them a 2-hour show every other Tuesday afternoon at 3 o'clock. Again, I think it connects with what Pippa was saying. That's not going to be great for maximising the audience for your radio station. You might well be serving that community of interest, which is the local WI, but if you have a marketplace of 25,000 people in your TSA, that's twice a month, 2-hour show at 3 o'clock is probably only serving the people that are actually in the studio with you. So doing the show is probably not the right route to go. So you do need to serve the local WI, but you need to serve the radio listeners. Or more to the point, you need to serve the radio listeners and the local WI, or whatever group it might be. And of course the local WI are also radio listeners. Now I've got a lot more listeners than I do people who are interested in WI content, but also a lot of listeners that might be interested in WI content but are not likely to sit through 2 hours worth of radio every second Tuesday at 3 o'clock. So when we understand that the way that media has changed, and we have to be aware that the media consumption's really changed. We have social media. There's a lot more choice on radio. People are listening on different platforms on radio. When you do some national news, the chances are the majority of your audience probably already know about it. They've already engaged with it. They've already liked it on Instaface or whatever it might be. The media landscape has changed. What we need to be aware of is, what, again, it's part of Pippa's presentation. What is it your listener wants? Now, let's first of all say you're not the BBC, so huge amounts of kind of block talk programming. You're going up against the BBC. They have millions of pounds to do it. It's public fund. We've paid for it, if you pay your TV licence. They're funded in entirely different ways. So trying to compete with the BBC is really hard. I think most of us do in this room is we're mostly music-led. Even though you might have a high proportion of speech on your station, the chances are you're still a music-led service. And you have some talk. And that some talk is really important. What is it you are saying that's of interest to your community of interest? And your community of interest might be the WI. It might be your broader audience. It might be just be a Hindi radio station. It might be a station aimed at over 70s. But your content must be of interest to the listener. So you must make that talk count. So if my local WI want to engage with the radio station, I don't have to give program, because that's likely to put off the majority of the listeners, which would be 99.999% of the other available listeners. But we can provide a service to the WI by maximising listeners by just giving them some short features. And this is an advertising proposition, by the way, to use in programming. And that's 1 2-hour programme. Let's use an advertiser. Sky Broadband, as an example, on Monday afternoon, had a 1-hour programme that's not going to engage with it as much of an audience as it would if they had a 1-month advertising campaign of 30 seconds. That's why advertising works. So that's how you can probably get away with your kind of speech content on your radio station, which means you can serve your WI, your local schools, and your local Age UK group or whatever it might be. So 2-hour WI show for listeners, not great. Lots of short features, very good, because the WI get to engage with your radio station. You can still bring them in, you can still train them. It might alleviate some studio time as well. And you know what? You might be teaching your audience something as well. It's unlikely that your audience are going to sit through 2 hours worth of WI programming, but they might listen through a minute's worth of feature, updated frequently on your radio station, and learn something and want to engage with them. So it's all about the listeners. Local businesses, let's go back into kind of how the advertising works, not just on commercial radio, but on community radio as well. Local businesses are radio listeners. But radio listeners are the most important people. Your job is to maximise those radio listeners, because you want to deliver as big an audience or potential customer base for your advertiser as you possibly can. I call it supporting the local economy. In fact, I wrote it into my... So I'm running out of breath here. Can somebody get me a glass of water, please? It's not a bar up there, is it? No, it's just water, okay. I wrote it into a licence application that I wanted to, you know... I'm not sure what your high street is like, but ours kind of, you know, appears to be failing. I actually think Andover is a little bit more robust. Thank you, waitress. A little more robust than most places in the UK, excuse me. But internally, there's a perception that, you know, businesses are failing in the high street. It's extremely difficult for smaller owner-manager businesses. So supporting the local economy is something which I've said that I want to do with my radio licence in Andover. What that meant is I'm going to sell lots of advertising. Which is kind of what we do. Just coming on to Andover Radio now, these are the bits that we do, and possibly with one exception, as I've just learned, what most of us do. We all have a radio station, yeah? Website, kind of social media bits. Anybody do anything in print? There's a couple of stations that do some amazing print bits in the community sector. Training, we kind of do that as well, and events. These are kind of the bits that we do. All of these make money. And you'll note that only one of those 6 things up there is actually governed by Ofcom. So 1 in 6 is your 50-50 rule. Oh, that 50-50 rule. Let's talk about it. Well, actually, we'll come on to it in a minute. It must be the next slide. But I've got 5 other options of bringing money into my organisation that are not just selling 30-second adverts on the radio. I still need to maximise my audience to get as much engagement and interaction with the content, as much coverage for the WI, as much coverage for my local window, door and conservatory company, High Street Andover. But all of the income generated across those 6 platforms that I've just mentioned go directly into supporting our community development initiatives, of which we have a handful as well. But not only can I use the radio station to put these initiatives on, I can then push them back out and charge for the services. So in effect, I've got a 2-way kind of income model here. So it's very commercial, in order to deliver all the bits that I said that I would do in my licence application. Dover Radio. See, Kim, you one in Kent, I guess, is it? If you need a logo, I've got one ready for you. This is it's quite an old version of our website, by the way. I mentioned that we have Andover Radio. It says, incidentally, it was a working title. I was going to come up with some cool brand name, you know, Smile FM or something, but so we applied for the license under Andover Radio, because it said what it did on the tin, and then I forgot that I wanted to come up with a better name, but to be perfectly honest with you, it does what it says on the tin. But I've got this sub-brand, so Love Andover is all the bits that we do off-air, all the training, all the events, the print publication bits, the social media, the website. So the website is loveandover.com, and I've never really believed that if your radio station's website is there for pictures of cheesy DJs with headphones around their neck, or for people to find out what's on the programme schedule, is ever going to work for you. A bit like Pippa, but I'm doing this online as well, is I'm challenging my local newspaper on delivering online content that's of interest to my community. Now in that, I might have a little bit for community perhaps, for my local WI group, but I've also got loads of local news. Can I go back? Oh yeah, there we go. So everything on the front page of our website is about local content. My marketplace is 52,000 people in Andover, so how many people live in Bridgewater, Dave?
45,000.
Oh, okay. I have to admit, Bridgewater started to look a little bigger than Andover when I was walking around it earlier. But marketplace of 52,000 in Andover, 15,000 unique users a month to the website. If it was a picture of cheesy DJs with headphones on, they probably wouldn't use the website. There's a mobile version of what we do. I mentioned earlier that we run events. We've run 2 Armed Forces days in Andover. I'd love to talk to you guys about this, because in total it's probably brought us in £35,000 or so. Bearing in mind my radio station is only 6 months old. We've run a proms thing in a local park. We're in discussion about launching a loyalty card in conjunction with one that already exists, but we're developing the mobile app version of it, putting your radio station's brand, you know, in the hand of your potential listener, and giving you another opportunity to go and talk to your local business in the high street who are failing, and use the radio station to promote the business, and use the app and promote the discount to drive them into the high street. This social media thing is fairly important as well. You know, the post reach that we get on social media is quite high, but I put my social media audience into an advertising package. I then separate that out on the invoice, so I don't get clobbered by this 50-50 rule thing. We'll come on to that again later, perhaps. Very specifically, I just want to tell you what we've done with Andover Radio. Some of you might think this is great, some of you might go, that's, you know, a drop in the ocean really. Pre-launch, so before we had a radio station, we managed to kind of generate £55,000 worth of income. It gave us 20 grand, it's online, it's on Company's House, you can see it. There's £20,000 worth of surplus on that. Then we launched the radio station, and I think we're going to close this financial year at something like 86,000 with bugger all left, because I spent it all on building a radio station. But my forecast on this kind of looks relatively clean, I think. And this is excluding some big grant funds that we're doing at the moment, because I focused the business really on doing the things that I said I would do in the application, supporting the local economy by maximising audience to deliver information to an audience, a larger audience that might be interested in things that the WI do, for instance. So this 100 grand's worth of surplus is a little bit concerning for me, because I quite like to spend it on nice things and newer computers and desks and repair the power supplies when people keep blowing it up. Which has happened twice, incidentally. It's quite expensive. So I mentioned earlier that we have 2 brands. There's Andover Radio and Love Andover, which you'll know quite well. One of them very specifically is the radio station, and the other one does lots of other bits. In fact, that's it, isn't it? It's kind of the community development arm of what we do. So everything we do out on the street, everything we do publicly, is really branded Love Andover. It almost happened by accident. I'd love to say that was a business development genius with this, but the reality is, when we were doing events in Andover before the radio station launched to raise that 55,000 that I just mentioned, it didn't make sense that we were called Andover Radio, because people would go, well, what frequency is it on? I don't know, we haven't won the licence yet. So we created Love Andover as a strapline that the two were kind of married together, but very specifically, Love Andover does everything that we do out in the street, and Love Andover Radio is the bit that we do on the radio station. I can talk to you about this in some more detail later, but there are also 2 separate limited companies involved in this. Can I have another?
Use an SM58. Yeah, the batteries are running out.
What's an SM58? Hello, Mike. Okay. So I will talk to you about this in some more detail. There are no 2 limited companies kind of that do this. And Love Andover, of course, can apply for public funding to provide particularly training services that we're doing at the moment. But of course, Love Andover will need publicity. So basically, Andover Radio will charge Love Andover for lots of the off-air services that it can provide to support Love Andover, which helps us with this 50-50 rule thing. Oh, there it is. So, hands up, how many have the 50-50 plus 15? Oh, not too many. Oh, when you've decided, put your hand. You're not quite sure. No one's sure. Has everyone got 50-50 without the 15? No. Okay. Fine. I have to be really specific. There's somebody in the room that could do this better. Basically, if you're licensed in a certain area, you can raise 50% of your total income through on-air advertising and sponsorship.
No, other way around.
No, 50-50. Which other way around would you like it? Okay, 50-50.
Some stations can only earn 15.
Oh, that's what it is. Yeah, okay, fine. Who've got the 15 grand rule? Oh, you guys do that then?
Yeah,
okay. Fascinating. Okay, so there are still a handful of people in this room that this matters to. I'm just saying don't. You know, it's so important that I wrote it 3 times. Just don't really worry about it. I've got a community development guy who works at Andover Radio and kind of runs off with Love Andover every now and then, does really incredible things. Like I got a big lottery fund, basically an acceptance letter the other day for £77,000 that I didn't even know that we'd applied for. That's how my board works. But he says radio does its thing. Radio goes off and delivers as many people as possible that it can to get listeners. It's brilliant. You go and do that, David. But I'm going to concentrate on this, and this is community development. This is the on-the-street stuff. This is the training. This is the DFIB training that we did the other day. The local authority tried to do it earlier this year, and they failed completely. We had 22 people in it. It's made us £1,000. We engage with young people, working with 2 or 3 kind of over-50s organisations. This guy, Morris is his name, goes and does all this community development. Not really interested in the radio station, as long as the radio station does what it's supposed to do, and that's promote all the work of the community development. And I think what I've ended up with at the end of all this is I thought I wanted to go and run a radio station, and then had to come do all the difficult community development things that Ofcom tell me that I really should do. What I've actually ended up with is a business which develops the local community in a massive variety of ways, but it's got the benefit of having a radio station. End of presentation.
Perfect. Always a professional, always a professional. I heard you talk many years ago when you were consulting with, was it Portsmouth, Hello Sailor FM or whatever you termed it, and I thought that's never going to work. But what I've seen today is you've actually put it into practice, and yes, you don't have to apologise to me at all, because I'm convinced that maybe my model isn't the only model. There we go. We don't have time at the moment for questions, because I'm sure there's going to be loads from a fantastic presentation from David there.